um, connection that will happen, stuff like that. But dude, it's crazy times, man.
Yeah, it really is, man. It's been pretty insane past year.
Yeah, for sure. With this whole the rally in DC for the Trump people too, that's nuts.
Dude, it's been insane. And then them banning like Trump, General Flynn, Sidney Powell, like
Oh my gosh, it's insane, dude. It's insane. And the people that support it are part of the problem. Supporting that is,
absolutely.
dude, it's
The
crazy.
crazy part is it's like ever since the election became official, technically, they just don't care. Like, okay, we're gonna ban them. We're gonna ban all these other people.
Once Georgia won,
Yeah.
big tech knew that Section 230 won't be an issue anymore,
Oh yeah, for
where
sure.
Twitter, Facebook aren't going to be looked at as publications and platforms. That's what Section 230 is for maybe those that don't know. But so immediately they're like, "Oh, cool. We got Senate on our side. We're we'll just do what we want." Although, dude, West Virginia is going to be I think is going to be at the front and center of it all because Joe Manchin he's a Democrat, but he's very right leaning, and he's
Yeah.
very not socialist at all. And so although, the Senate is split in 50-50, I think it's really secretly 50-51-49
I'm hoping
because
so.
Manchin, I think, is going to be that deciding factor.
Well, the crazy part too is I'm hoping and praying that there's gonna be enough people on the left that are kind of like, okay, this is a little too radical.
And dude, I honestly think that's most Democrats. I think that they 90%, 95% are just solid people, but the minority thinking has the
Yeah.
loudest voice. So
Yeah.
like the AOCs, the squads, Kamala
Oh,
Harris's,
absolutely.
they have the loudest voice. And I think that a lot of Democrats in rural uh, counties and rural cities in the House or in the Senate are, they're going to get tested
Yeah.
because, okay, do I go along with this radical movement or do I go with my constituents, what my constituents
Absolutely.
want? So hopefully, I'm optimistic.
Yeah. Same
Um,
here.
I'm optimistic about it in that I think a lot of Democrats hopefully will continue to vote according to their constituents.
Well, it's crazy too if you think about like Reagan, one of the greatest presidents. He was on the left, but if today he'd be considered on the right because how far their policies have swung to the left. So I'm hoping there's a lot more people
Reagan
that are
or
on the left.
Kennedy?
I'm sorry, Reagan. Yeah.
You mean Kennedy? Reagan was on the right. Ronald
No, I'm
Reagan
sorry,
was on.
Kennedy. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Sorry, I was
you're
having
fine.
this conversation with someone else going between
No, you're
all
totally
of
fine.
them.
I know what you
Yeah,
mean.
so you know what I mean. It's pretty crazy how far left they've gone.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I'm with Ronnie Tucci, who is welcome to More Than a Party podcast, my man. I appreciate you.
Yeah, appreciate you having me come on.
Yeah, I appreciate you being willing to get on here and just talk with me and sit down and have a conversation. But um, we were getting into the political spectrum of it all and political talks. But I want to, maybe take people's minds off of some politics for a little bit, and I really want to allow you to have a moment and introduce yourself to people that don't know you. And uh, so if you just want to introduce yourself and maybe tell
Sure.
people a little bit about what you do, where you live, your family, all that good stuff, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Ronnie Tucci. I grew up here in Southern California for the most part. Um, Lived up in LA for a little bit. It's actually where I believe I met like your whole family.
Mhm.
Um, my parents are pastoring out there in Almani. That's where me and your brother like met. And there's some like funny old pictures of us in a swimming pool floating around somewhere from years ago. But yeah, so we moved back down to Colton when I was like 7, So pretty much lived in Southern California my whole life. Um, I am a chef at a restaurant in Anaheim, California. I'm one of the sous chefs there, like fine dining, new American food. Um, so I've been doing that. I'll be there 10 years this Sunday,
Wow.
which is pretty crazy. Time flies, man. I've been married going on 9 years. I have a wonderful 4-year-old, crazy little kid. Um, but yeah, so I mean, that's pretty much my life. I've been in church and the fellowship pretty much my whole life.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah,
Right on. Well, I knew you were a chef, and I knew you've been doing it for a long time. You post pictures that make my mouth drool of food that
thanks,
you've
man.
cooked. I'm like, man, I'm hungry now. You know what I'm saying? But so let's talk a little bit about that. What made you want to become a chef? How, like, when did your love for cooking uh, begin?
Yeah. So it's pretty funny because growing up, food was always a big part of the family. Big family gatherings, birthday celebrations are always kind of centered around the dining room table. Um, Come from a big family, not as big as yours, but I have five other siblings. Two that we adopted later on. But growing up, food was always a huge part. My dad loves to cook, so growing up, my dad was like, "Hey, let's try cooking this. Let's smoke some whole sides of salmon and stuff like that." So food was always a big part. And my dad had actually wanted to go to culinary school. He didn't end up going and going to a different route. But his love for cooking kind of passed on to me. So fast forward till to college, I was actually going to school for something completely different. I was going to school for psychology and social behavior. I was in my senior year, literally like 10 units from graduation. And I was just like over it.
Yeah.
I was like, man, I need a break. I've been going I was homeschooled. So I went to community college like through my high school years, graduated high school, went straight to like a UC as a sophomore. So I was just like going full steam, never really had much of a break or whatever. So the plan was, graduate, join the FBI, go to like behavior profiling and all that kind of stuff. I was like really into it. But once I hit my senior year, I was almost done. I was like over it. So this opportunity came up to essentially go work in the ranch where I work now. They built like this test kitchen, which is kind of unheard of, like in the restaurant industry, to build a kitchen a year before the actual restaurant is even built, and essentially just R&D and research the menu. So I came on board as like a dishwasher prep cook, knew absolutely nothing about the industry, but went in with a couple chefs that were the executive chef now, the executive sous chef, and the pastry chef, and they essentially like taught me everything. It was like a year of culinary school.
Mm.
So what was supposed to be, a quarter break turned into a career. And 10 years later, I'm still there, still cooking, just fell in love with the industry, fell in love with cooking, fell in love with feeding people.
Yeah, it's
So I
pretty
never looked
amazing.
back.
Yeah, that's. I mean, you're still helping people in a way.
Yeah.
Food is such a. I was listening to some restaurant owners and just talk during all this pandemic, and they were just
Yeah.
really just bringing some their passion for the food industry, but they were just like, food brings people together. You wanted to
Absolutely.
be a psychologist, and you're helping people in a way. You're getting to the root of people's problems and helping them work through it, and eating a good meal, eating like
Absolutely.
a solid meal, helps people, right?
It
It's
really
but it's
does.
it's just in a different way, and so you're still you're part of a community that brings people together at a restaurant. The chef, the waiters and the waitresses by name
Yeah.
when you go there a lot. So it has an impact
It
on
does.
the community.
Yeah, food is more than just like sustenance, and if you talk to most people, they have some sort of memory that's revolving around food. Some sort of great meal they had, whether it was cooked in a restaurant, whether it was cooked at home, was something that is very reminiscent of, a good time, reminiscent of a fond memory. Um, most people have, some childhood memory of like something they ate growing up that when you eat it again, it kind of brings those flashbacks and brings back that memory. Oh, wow, I remember eating this crazy mac and cheese my mom used to make, or whatever it may be. And so that's one of the great things about food is it's more than just on a physical level, more than just sustenance.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I love what you're saying. One of the food memories I have is fighting to the death with my six siblings, trying to get a second plate. No, I'm just
Yeah.
kidding. But growing up in a big family, you learn how to eat really fast, uh,
Absolutely.
because if you're not eating fast, if you're not finishing your meal, then someone else is going to eat faster than you, and
Absolutely.
uh, and get leftovers.
Absolutely, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, that's
Um,
that's the great thing about food. It brings, families together, brings friends together.
Yeah, and one of the bummers is that when you take that away, right? When
Oh
you
yeah.
take the ability for people to gather together, when you take that option away, it really does. People begin to isolate and division, and we're seeing it now. We're seeing so much division. We're seeing
Yeah.
so much disunity
Yeah.
throughout the country. And I'm not saying, I'm not saying restaurants were what was keeping us together, because obviously that would just not be true. But there
Yeah.
there is, on a biblical sense, fellowship,
Absolutely.
breaking bread, and enjoying one another's company, that
Absolutely.
allows you to get to know one another, to get to know people's problems, to get to know what they're going through, and you're able to work through things together. So, just to emphasize that, it doesn't matter what you're eating, right? We have
Yeah.
fellowships at our church that, just for cost sake, you have to order a bunch of Little Caesars pizzas,
Yeah. Absolutely.
but it's about the fellowship. It's about
Yeah.
staying 3 hours after the service ends, just
Absolutely.
talking to people.
Hmm.
And I'm sure you see that a lot in the restaurant industry, where you're like, is that person still here?
Yeah. Well, people come in and dine for like 4 hours. I get there at 5, and they'll be sometimes the last ones in the building, uh,
Wow.
which is pretty crazy. It's also, like you said, it speaks to they want to enjoy time together and break bread. It's something. It gives people an excuse to get together, but it's also, an important part of our society, I believe, and especially, like you said, seeing it now, taking that away. I remember the first time. Most of my siblings were all older and grown now and have families and doing other stuff now. But the first time we got together, my parents during all this, and finally had like a dinner together. My parents, it's nice, it's refreshing, it's mentally refreshing to just finally see everyone, to finally break bread over table with everyone there.
Yeah, dude, absolutely. So going back
Something
to,
that we had missed.
oh, yeah, sorry, we broke up for a sec, but um, going back to your passion for cooking and beginning of it all, what were some of your early trials, or some obstacles that you might have had to overcome, or some discouragements, like, what do you mean this isn't good, or what do
Yeah.
you mean it could be better? Is there anything that comes to mind that you kind of had to work through?
Yeah, it's this industry, and being a chef, it comes with you kind of have to have an ego in some ways, especially as you like move up through the ranks, and being told that yeah, that doesn't really work, it stings a little bit. But one thing I've always learned is you can't take things personal. So if you take a step back and say, okay, wait, why does this not work? I remember I was probably cooking maybe 2 years, and I was like, I'm gonna come up with this cool like amuse bouche, which is like a one little single biter to excite the palate before
um
meal. And I
can
remember
you
working
can
on
you
it, and I put it in front of my chef, and he was like, "Yeah,
can you
what's up?"
repeat that? Can you repeat that one more time, just what you were doing? You remember you came up with an idea?
Oh yeah, so it was like an amuse bouche, which is like a one little biter, like
Okay.
single bite before meal, supposed to like excite the palate. Um, we serve it to like our VIPs and stuff. So I made this thing, and it was like, looking back, it was so weird. It was like this crab mixture, which was good, but it was like a watermelon foam and like uh, fried tarragon, and I was like, "Oh, this is like cool. This is cutting edge food." Put it in front of my chef, and he was like, "Yeah, I don't think this works." And I was like, "What in the world? Like, this is cool." And I actually like tasted it as a whole, and I was like, "Yeah, this is pretty gross."
Yeah.
It just doesn't work well together. But you know, it's a learning experience and a lot of trial and error. You know, I was looking back at some old notes that I had and old notebooks and drawings of like dishes I had. I'm like, what was I thinking at the time? Like, why did I think this would work? Um, but you know, it's a growing process. But like starting out, you know, this industry is very, you have to be very immersed in the industry when you start out. Um, Especially if you want to do well, you know, fully immerse yourself, learning and reading hundreds of cookbooks and just trying to learn as much as you can. But with that, you know, it does make it hard on, you know, scheduling and having a family and being involved in church even. I mean, I remember there was like 1 month, I think it was like a December, I was working 60, 70 hour weeks. And like, I think I made it to like one church service
Mm.
the whole month because I was working all day, every day. Um, so that took a lot of working out, you know, with my family, working out with my wife. We had been married. I think we got married like 4 months into the restaurant, like actually opening. So it took a lot at the time, you know, trying to figure everything out, being newlyweds, trying to figure out how are we gonna live and figure this whole thing out. She was working at Starbucks at the time, so she had that opening shift. So I would get home, you know, midnight, 12:30. She'd be asleep, wake up at 4 to go do the opening shift at Starbucks. So we would see each other when she got off at like 11, see each other for an
Mm.
hour. Then I'd go to work and we would do it all over again. But
Yeah.
you know, it's part of the struggle with the industry. You know, I know a lot of people have, is, you know, the hours are crazy, the demand is crazy. And your stuff, if you don't find that balance and kind of work your way through it, it makes it really hard later on.
Yeah. So, yeah, that could we can go into depth about just the the price that a lot of people pay for work,
Yeah,
and that the things that get left to the side. And that's amazing that obviously you're going on 9 years of marriage, so you guys are doing something right, and that's incredible that you are able to work through certain things. But 70 hours a week, man, what goes into the beginning of a restaurant? People see, I'm pretty ignorant on obviously starting a business and stuff like that, which is why I don't advocate just willy-nilly saying shut every business down, shut every
yeah, absolutely.
restaurant down, because I don't know. That's not my place to say that. And so when people are like, "Oh, the government can just supplement things and the government can just," I'm like, first off, the government shouldn't have even have the power to do certain things. Obviously,
Absolutely.
my stance. But why don't you just talk a little bit about what goes into? So you were with this restaurant from day one. So
Yeah.
you've seen it grow, you've
Mhm.
seen it expand. So what might people not know about the beginning of a restaurant?
Yeah, you know, opening a restaurant is a crazy thing. I remember we brought our full staff on, all the cooks, everybody on, essentially a week before we opened. Because most restaurants, especially fine dining, there's that period before you open where you're uh, training your staff, teaching everyone how to cook it. You're doing these like family dinners where, you know, okay, everyone can bring a family member. They're going to sit in the dining room, do a mock dinner service. But you know, every pan, every plate, every fork, every utensil, every piece in that restaurant has to be brought in, has to be washed, has to be clean. I remember when we first got, you know, our all of our smallwares, which is all the pots and pans and all the small equipment. I want to say it was like 50 pallets of stuff sitting in our parking lot that we had to bring in, you know, open, take all the tags off, wash it all, do all of that, you know, just in order to be able to start to cook stuff.
Mm,
Um, you know, it's most places, especially like I said, fine dining, you know, it's months of preparation, months of training, and all this time before the first actual guest sits in the restaurant. Because no one wants to go to have a nice dinner on the first night of a restaurant and no one have any idea what they're doing.
yeah.
You know, to have your server tell you, "Oh, I just started yesterday. I don't really know the menu." um, so there's a lot that goes into it, and a lot of, you know, even myself, you know, going into this industry, I didn't understand everything that was going on. I was learning along the way, and there's so much that goes into serving somebody a good meal. There's so much that goes into, from, you know, the dishwasher, who we call, you know, the most important part of our kitchen. Without a dishwasher, you know, they're usually the hardest working ones. We don't have clean pans, don't have can't do what we do without them. And a lot of that stuff kind of gets overlooked. There's a lot that goes into putting that first dish in front of somebody. A lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of research and development to making those flavors work together and figuring out the techniques to use on the plate. Um, and like I said, a lot of that is fine dining. There's smaller restaurants that don't have that rigorous training beforehand, but the same thing goes. A lot of mom and pop restaurants. There's a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of stuff invested into that restaurant before they can even serve customers.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so many things go into it. So, what does your job entail, or how did your job progress? So you started, um,
Yeah.
and
So I
then
started
so
as like a
from where you started,
dishwasher.
and then where you are now. Okay, so you started a
Yeah. So
dishwasher.
yeah, dishwasher, prep cook, and then I was just like training, you know, trying to soak in everything I could get from these guys. When we opened, I was working what we call garmage, which is essentially like our pantry or like salad and cold items. I worked my way up the line, have worked every station on that line, grill, saute, fry, done everything on the line. And then about 4 years ago, yeah, right around 4 years ago, I got promoted to sous chef. So I was a lead before that. I got promoted to sous chef. So now my job entails, menu development, recipe development, training and onboarding new staff and interviewing. And now, as of the past year and a half or so, I handle a lot more of the admin stuff, all of our ordering, smallwares, food cost, inventory, all kind of more of the back end financial stuff. I help to run and take care of along with our executive chef.
Sounds like a lot of work. How
Yeah, it's
so?
fun
How?
though.
Yeah, no, yeah, that sounds pretty amazing. How has that been affected? How has your restaurant, if at all, I'm sure it has, been affected with COVID and especially in California?
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. California has been not the most friendly to restaurants. With the first shutdown, it was pretty sudden. Everything was kind of up in the air. We were starting to slow down. People were afraid to go out. Then all of a sudden, it was like, hey, we're closing down. So we had to let go of. On a normal basis, when we are busy, we employ a staff of like upwards of like 40.
Mm,
So we had to pretty much tell everyone, hey, listen, you're not laid off. We're not firing you. We're essentially furloughing you. We don't have hours for you. And we had to transition to like takeout and delivery only with just the chef team, which was 4 sous chefs, and then our executive chef and our pastry chef, and like one dishwasher that we were able to bring on later on. But you're talking about making. I'll just throw some numbers out there. I mean, on a busy Saturday night, we were doing upwards of like $30,000 just in food,
mm.
to doing $300 in takeout a night. It's pretty crazy. And so we were able to bring a cook on and do all that kind of stuff for the first shutdown, but it wasn't easy. I mean, we're very, very fortunate we had an owner that did not want to shut down, that was willing to still pay a full salary, which by the grace of God, that's incredible, especially in this right now in this industry. That said, hey, you know what, like, you guys are good, I'm gonna pay you guys full salary, just keep doing what you're doing, we'll figure this out along the way. um, we were able to reopen, what was it, Labor Day, I think. We were able to reopen fully inside, so, with and all that. And before that, we dropped so much money into making the restaurant, COVID safe. We installed filters and UV lights and AC. We put up partitions between our booths, and we just didn't like hang plexiglass. Like, we had someone come in, a carpenter, and made these like glass and wooden partitions that looked like they'd been a part of the restaurant since we opened. Um, we said, if we're going to do this, and this looks like COVID's going to be around for a while, and this is going to be what we're going to have to do for the foreseeable future, let's do it the right way.
Mhm.
So we dropped a ton of money into like changing the restaurant, getting it ready for guests, taking tables out, to make sure everything was 6 feet apart. And then we reopened. We were busy, and it's pretty crazy. Once we reopened, man, people were wanting to come out. We were having some of our like, even at reduced capacities, we were having some of our busiest nights, in terms of like selling food. You know, people were calling like, hey, me and my family of 20 people want to come in and have dinner. We don't care if we have to sit outside. Um, which for a fine dining restaurant, for someone to come in and say, hey, like we want to spend the money and feed 20 people, and during a pandemic where people are losing their jobs, it speaks a lot to people just want to go out. People want
Mhm.
to go out and eat. People want to spend time together with their families, celebrate anniversaries and birthdays and all that. And so we were very, very fortunate. And then, boom, they hit us with outdoor only. So, we were trying to figure that out. We actually bought like one of those big tents, set it up, retrofitted it with like heaters, like spent a ton of money, built like a platform. So, our guest doesn't have to step off of a curb onto it. Essentially, just like one straight walkway. Like we have a great facilities team, so they like built all this stuff out for us. We opened, I believe, outside only like the week of Thanksgiving, outside only for a little bit, and then boom, they shut us down again. Um, which is crazy to think about that. Yeah, I understand the numbers, and we can go on and on about the numbers for days. But for to demand of a restaurant that if you want to stay open, you have to follow these guidelines. And restaurants, especially small mom and pop ones, spent tons of money to be able to do that. Masks and shields for their employees. You know, barriers between everybody and all this stuff to spend all that money to be told, hey, you know what? Sorry, I know you did all that, but now you need to go to takeout only. It's crazy. It's almost a kick in the face to most people. We spend all this money. Restaurants aren't gonna last because of this, especially because of the second shutdown. Say, oh, we'll supplement, we'll do this, we'll do that. It doesn't go a long way, especially when you have other, large companies getting a majority of that money. Uh, the small mom and pops don't really see it. It's very sad, very unfortunate.
Yeah, that's so true, man. Ah, man, my heart breaks for places like mom pa's California, and especially in California and New York,
Yeah.
that aren't going to be able to recover. And for a political side that literally hates big business, during this time, big business has been the only thing that's really been flourishing. And and I'm all about the free market.
Yeah.
I'm all about capitalism. But if you truly hate big business, you hate Jeff Bezos, and you hate you know
Oh,
the
absolutely.
Walmart family and all these different people that are making billionaires, and yet you want to close down some
Yeah.
mom and pop restaurant that's just trying to survive, is ludicrous. And
Absolutely.
you're hurting the industry, you're hurting people, you're hurting families. It's insane. But you're in California, so you said you could talk about the numbers. What is the reasoning behind the shutdowns? They say all these different things, do all these
Yeah.
precautious measures, preventative measures, and yet they continue to shut down. So you would, or you're there. I hear things. I hear that contact tracing is very limited to restaurants, and I hear all these good things about restaurants taking it serious and all doing what they can just to stay open, and
Yeah.
that contact tracing isn't leading back to restaurants. It's not leading back to gyms. It's leading back to homes and houses and people just living together.
Yeah.
What reason are they giving you all for just shutting down the restaurant industry,
Well, in
if
my
one at all?
opinion, yeah, in my opinion, I think, restaurants and gyms and, churches have become like the scapegoat for all of this. You know, we can have riots and protests in downtown LA with thousands and thousands of people shoulder to shoulder, and that's okay. And they won't trace anything back to that. You won't call it a super spreader event, but they'll say, oh, these restaurants are having 100 people, 200 people in there throughout a 5 hour span. And that's where that's coming from. And so I think it's easy to blame, like, oh, where people gather, that's what we'll put the blame on. But the numbers don't add up to that. I know there was a court case in LA County where the restaurants were fighting it, saying, hey, like, if you're going to shut us down, then you show us proof that the numbers are saying that it's coming from us. And they couldn't do it. And so they were able to reopen. And then Gavin Newsom came in and said, nope, we're shutting down the whole state. So that got overridden. Uh, but then there is no proof there, and I'm sure most people, well, at least in California, was big news. Gavin Newsom went and ate at one of the best restaurants in the country,
Yeah.
and was sitting there no mask with all his friends, but it's not okay for you and your family to go celebrate your son's birthday, to go celebrate, an anniversary with just, you and your wife somewhere. You're not allowed to do that. Um, it's pretty ludicrous, and the hypocrisy is very blatant and evident, but it doesn't seem like, it's not much is changing, at least not now.
Yeah, dude. The hypocrisy for so many leaders is through the roof. And then Gavin Newsom had the audacity to try and deny it and say that he was outside, um, or that he didn't know so many people were going to be there, and whatever
Yeah,
excuses he wanted to make. And I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, dude, you should be able to go. You should
absolutely.
be able to do whatever you want. That's the point, is that we should be able to make our own decision about every
Absolutely.
single risk we are willing to take. If I want to risk my life to COVID and go to a restaurant, then that's my choice on to do
Absolutely.
into doing that. If I want to go celebrate at a 50-year-old's birthday party with a lot of people there, that's my decision on doing that. And so Gavin Newsom looked at the risk, he looked at the reward, and he still made that decision. And
Absolutely.
that's what we all do, and we all should be able to make that choice. But of course, the problem is that he's saying, "Do as I say, not as I do," and
Absolutely.
it is having real life effects for people in the industry across the
Yeah.
world, across the nation. And it's just so absurd that people actually support this guy, or they try and justify his actions, or try and make excuses for him. So, um, speaking about real life consequences, oh man, froze for a sec. I'm gonna wait till we catch up.
There you are.
Sorry, yeah. All right. So talking about real life consequences, um, what have been, you were blessed to still, your boss said, hey, we're gonna still pay you, we're gonna have your salary, and some other sous chefs, you said, also had that privilege, and that really is just a testament to God looking out for you and all these good things. That's a
Absolutely.
tremendous blessing. I'm sure you know people that have lost their job and have been suffering.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. There's,
what's it been like for them?
I have friends in the industry that, haven't worked or have worked very minimal hours since the beginning. Um, there's been places that have just completely shut down. It's pretty sad looking at the restaurant industry itself, the effect that this is going to have. You know, the first time we shut down, we had to let everyone go, and then we brought back like once we reopened, we brought back like 90% of our staff. They were on for a couple months, and then the second shutdown happened. And the way it worked out was my boss couldn't be there, so I had to sit there and tell 30 people, "Hey, listen, guys, I'm sorry. I know you guys are all starting to make some money again, but we don't have hours. We're shut down. We have to furlough you." Uh, and we have a 70-year-old cook, this older Thai lady. She's been in the industry for longer than both of us have been alive. Um, really hard worker. For her to come up to me like, "Chef, like if you need me to come wash dishes, if you need me to come clean the floors, I will do it. I need the money. I need the hours." It's sad. It's it's heartbreaking to be able to sit there and like I could do something, but I can't. And there's like countless stories of that. In this industry, people like, especially because this industry is very the pay scale isn't the best, especially as a dishwasher, as a cook. Starting out, like it's a long time before you actually can make pretty good money in this industry. That's why most guys work two jobs in a restaurant. Why guys are working crazy hours to make that overtime to be able to make a living for their family. And so to take that all away and say, "Hey, I'm gonna throw $600 at you to supplement you not working," it's really sad. And there's people that are struggling, people that have um, where they were able to come back to work, but their girlfriend, their wife got completely laid off. Um, it's very sad, seeing restaurants close. There's some of the best restaurants in this country. Uh, that were starting out that were here in California that just completely shut down. So like for the restaurant industry, we have what's called like the Michelin Guide. So the Michelin Guide was in California, was gone because of funding, but it came back last year. First year, people were excited. There's restaurants that were like top tier that got 2 Michelin stars, 1 Michelin star, that were on track to get their second this year that completely shut down. You know, chefs that are like world class, some of the best in the world, being told, hey, you know what? Sorry, we can't afford to keep your restaurant open. So our investors are backing out. So we have to shut the whole place down completely, which is insane. And so they're saying number wise that 60% of restaurants, that upwards of 60% of restaurants won't last or won't be able to do the same amount of business as they did before COVID, which is pretty crazy. It's a huge number.
Yeah, that's insane. And to top it all off, with little to zero evidence
Yeah.
that they have any proof that this is working, that it's going to
Yeah.
make any difference. And I think one of the issues is that if they were to just say, okay, restaurants should remain open and can remain open as long as they're following all these guidelines, yada, 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 then they would be admitting that they shouldn't have shut you guys down in the first place.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's the biggest problem, is that these arrogant, self-righteous dictators that are in power refuse to humble themselves and say, hey, we made a mistake. Hindsight is
Yeah.
2020. We need to start opening up restaurants. We need to start opening up business. But instead, they choose to insult people, the citizen, the constituents, and treat them like peasants and say, here's $600.
Yeah.
What a demeaning, what an insulting thing to say, that, hey, you just go buy yourself a lollipop, go buy yourself some candy with
Yep.
600. The audacity that that's actually going to make a difference in people's lives is just absurd.
It really is absurd. And it's like you said, it's demeaning to people to say, hey, we've taken away your livelihood. We've taken away your ability to make a living, to have a job. You need to stay home, but here's $600 to make you feel better. In this industry, especially the restaurant industry, the service industry, a lot of these people, like I said, they're not making a ton of money. So you're taking away the livelihood of someone that is working 2 jobs as a dishwasher, making minimum wage, to be able to make ends meet with his family, and taking that away completely. Yeah, there's some restaurants that have stayed open, but not enough of them to really fulfill that need. Yeah, there's unemployment, but those benefits don't last long. You're not making the full amount of money. And
No.
especially in this industry where there's a lot of passion and a lot of creativeness, the mental toll that it's taken on a lot of chefs and a lot of people that I've seen, like, hey, like I can't go in there and do what I love. I can't go feed people. I can't go create. I can't go do something that pushes me and drives me. That's demeaning not only to a person but to their soul, to what they are and to what they want to do mentally and physically. And I think the ramifications of that are going to be very far reaching moving forward. I know there's some chefs, like I said, that were world class chefs that I looked up to, chefs that honestly were probably, if their restaurants would have stayed open, could have been like on the top 100 list of the world. And
Mm.
they're not even cooking anymore. There's one chef that's a butcher inside of a grocery store now. There's another one that's doing plumbing because their restaurants got shut down. They couldn't do what they love, so they had to find another way to support their family. And you want to talk about, like, we hear it in church all the time, like, oh, this is my destiny. This is what I'm, what God has called me to do. There's people that feel that way, that, hey, this is my passion, and gets taken away from them. It's like, okay, now I got to go learn another craft, go learn something that is essential so that I can support
Yeah.
my family.
Yeah. And it's so sad to see that. It's sad to um to know people like that have just been their life has just been ripped apart, and for no reason at
Yeah.
all. People want to try and justify it, right, with COVID, and they want to try and bring up all numbers and whatnot, but we that's a different discussion. Um, I think one thing that uh, a misconception that people have, and I hope that people are realizing this, is that business owners don't just have millions of dollars sitting
Yeah.
in some savings account that they can just, oh, tax the rich, tax them at 60% margin, and they're millionaires and they make a lot of money. And I hope that people are paying attention to be able to see the effects that when you shut down a business, the business owner isn't like, oh, no problem, we don't need the revenue
Yeah.
anymore, because I'll supplement everyone's income with my own savings account. And
Yeah.
I mean, the idea of that is so stupid.
Absolutely.
Oh man, I'm so passionate about it, and it's such a bummer that people think that way. And I pray that they begin to open up their eyes, because it's clearly thousands of restaurants are closed
Yeah.
permanently.
Yeah.
And it's not because the business owner is like, well, I don't want to spend my own money. It's not, they don't have any money.
Yeah.
There, and you could speak more to this, but restaurants, as far as I know, just from the little I've read and listened to, as far as like the breaking even or even making money
Yeah.
just on a regular basis, pre-COVID is pretty slim to
It's pretty
sometimes probably
insane.
can be none.
Yeah. So like margins for the restaurant industry, they're very slim. So a typical restaurant, is 30% lowest side food cost. And then you
Can,
take into account overhead, you take
hey
into
Ronnie,
account labor. Yeah.
can you say that one more time? You said restaurant at the beginning. What were you saying?
Yeah. So restaurant,
Margins.
yeah, margins are very slim as it is. It's very difficult pre-COVID to make good money. I mean, you take into account your profits. I mean, 30% of that goes to food cost. Typically 30 to 40% of that goes to labor. Then you're talking about overhead and rent and supplies and doing all that stuff. Most restaurants are only bringing in at the most 15% on the high side to like 6-7% profit, and that's if they're lucky, which isn't a lot of money. When you look at the grand scheme, you got to pay your staff, you got to pay insurances, you got to pay all this stuff to keep your restaurant open, and you're not profiting much. And most places have an investor or have a group of investors that want to see a return. So any profit you make goes straight to them in order to pay back what they invested. So
Mm.
the real restaurant owner, the guy that's passionate behind it, that this is my dream to make, isn't going to profit much money for years. Isn't going to see, a lot of chefs, won't take a large salary, won't take much of a salary when they first start out, because all that money needs to go into the restaurant. People have a hard time going out and paying, X amount of dollars for a good meal, and like, oh, these places charge too much, but that burger you're eating somewhere costs money to put on a plate. I think that's one thing that people are going to see once COVID ends or whatever they start to reopen, is that food prices are going to go up. I mean, that your favorite mom and pop place that you eat your favorite burger from, you spent $8 for that burger, is now going to be $12, $15, because people have to make up that money. People have to be able to fill that gap. Because even that $8 burger, $10 burger you bought before, that costs $3 to $4 just to put on the plate, just in product, just in the food itself, not taking into account labor, not taking into account the rent. All of that adds up. And so this industry, you don't. Most restaurants don't make a ton of money. They're not really that profitable. They may look, especially fine dining restaurants. People look at like, oh, their owner makes a ton of money, or that restaurant's just trying to gouge people to make money. That's not always true. Very rarely is it true, because the margins are so slim. I mean, every piece of food that goes on a plate has a cost assigned to it. And some things, people love, a good steak, but that steak costs money to put on a plate.
Yeah, man. That's yeah. That, and it's good to hear the breakdown too, so that people understand that this idea again that the government is going to fill every need and every void
Yeah.
is just absurd. And you want to talk about people that you want to, in the world we hear a lot about privilege. the most privileged people are the ones saying that everything should be shut down. Um,
Yeah.
the ones saying that, uh, to prevent certain spreads and different things. They're the only ones that can afford it. People
Yeah.
that are saying, we need to remain locked down, typically are the ones who don't have to worry about where their income comes from.
Yeah.
And again, I hope people are realizing that, and I hope people are seeing that, um, seeing, the media, they continue doing their job. CNN, Fox News,
Yeah.
all those guys and all those girls, they continued reporting. And
Yeah.
they're the ones saying, we need a lockdown. Gavin Newsom never lost a paycheck.
Nope.
His health advisors never lost a paycheck.
No.
So people that are losing paychecks
Yeah.
are your neighbor and your cousin and your brother and your
Yeah.
sister, because dictator Newsom and dictator Cuomo decided that, they're God's gift to earth, and that they should be able to make a decision for the
Yeah,
peasants.
absolutely. And the funny thing is they do these shutdowns. They shut down all restaurants, say, hey, takeout and delivery only. We're going to slow the spread. The spread has, according to their numbers, has like doubled, quadrupled in some places. But you're going to sit there and tell me that closing restaurants helped it. No, it doesn't at all. And you're actually hurting the American people, hurting your constituents by saying, hey, you guys can't go out to eat. Not only are you keeping people from gathering, but you're taking away people's jobs, taking away people's businesses, taking away people's ability to actually live and make a living. And like you said earlier, it's demeaning. It's demeaning to the normal person that actually has to work for their paycheck. They can't sit at home and say, okay, I'm going to get money no matter what. That can afford to sit at home and say, oh, we're going to quarantine for the next 6, 7 months, you know, but they're more than willing to pay for that service person to deliver food to their house, more than willing to pay for that person to go and pick up food at the restaurant down the street so that they can sit in the luxury of, I don't have to work. It's sad and it's very demeaning.
Yeah. Hey, let's take a quick. I'm just gonna pause this for just 1 second.
Cool.
All right. Sorry about that, folks, for that little delay. But yeah, man, it's so demeaning. It's so ridiculous that they're just making policies out of thin air, and they're you know, infringing on your rights, infringing on your ability to make money, to make a profit.
Yeah.
Everyone was People on the left political side of the aisle want to talk about rights and certain rights. Well, rights are being taken away. Um,
They are.
you know, and you talked a little bit about all the things that your restaurant personally did to to uh, to go along with those guidelines. What
Yeah.
were they? So you put barriers in between
Yeah. So we
tables.
have we have booths, and they built these like wooden barriers with real glass in between and made it look like there was a permanent fixture, like it had been there since the beginning. So we spent a ton of money into like retrofitting all this stuff and building all this stuff to adhere. We bought a tent. Um, we had to buy shields for all of our dishwashers, supply masks for all of our staff, put these crazy like UV filters and this whole system into our AC ducts and into our AC system that's supposed to kill COVID particles in the air, um, just so that we can say, hey, we are a safe place for people to come and to adhere to the guidelines. So in
And
order
did
to
you have
reopen,
did you have health people coming by to check your restaurant?
yeah, so we actually had a health inspector come out before we reopened just to kind of look over everything. And he was like, you guys went overboard. He was like, most people aren't doing this. He's like, right now, this is the safest restaurant in Orange County. No one is adhering to the guidelines as closely as you guys are and putting the time and the money and the effort into it. Um, and so, even with that being said, he's like, I visited in the past week like 300 and something restaurants. He's like, this is the restaurant that is the best in Orange County that has done the best job of, adhering and doing what they need to do and to make it look like it's a part of the restaurant. Because, going out eating at a fine dining restaurant is more than the food, it's the experience and the atmosphere. So when we did it, it was like, okay, we want to make sure we keep that atmosphere. Because if we're just going to put some cheap plexiglass up, that's going to diminish the fact if you're eating in a fine dining restaurant, you're eating in a nice
Sure.
place. So we put all that money into it, and then when we went outside, trying to get a tent wasn't the easiest thing because everyone else had them. So we actually are able just to buy the tent, build the platform underneath it, carpet that platform in order to do that, extend our atmosphere and extend the atmosphere of the restaurant into a tent. Excuse me. It's not, we installed heaters like in the roof of the tent so that it stays warm when it gets cold at night, and put all this time and this effort into it. It's not cheap, and it's not something that most restaurants take lightly, because if they can't do it right, they can't be open. So, they adhere to these guidelines, and then 2 weeks into it, nope, sorry, I know you spent all this money, but time to shut down again.
Yeah, and even when they are doing it right, that's exactly, what you're saying is even
Yeah.
when they are doing it right, everyone's following the guidelines. We're quarantining. We're on
Yeah.
house arrest. You tell us these things, and so at first everyone was believing them. Like, all right, 15 days to slow the spread, and then a year later, they're still making the
Yeah.
same guidelines, and it's absurd that they think anything is changing. They think anything is working. So
Yeah.
we've seen this huge uh, escape from California. Is that something that you've seen people do? Is that
Yeah.
something you guys have considered? Is that something your business has considered, or you guys sticking around?
Um, yeah, our restaurant will probably stay for now. The owner of our company, I know he's made talks of it before, like, because California itself isn't very conducive to businesses or restaurants in general. He's made the threat before to them, oh, we're just going to move, because he has companies in North Carolina. We're just going to move our headquarters to North Carolina. Or I've had friends, that moved to Idaho, that have said, hey, like, we're over this. People that have moved to Texas, they're saying, we can't live here anymore. Not only because of the policies, not only because of how far left it's become, but because of the cost of living. Um, California is insanely expensive. And people want to look at it, if you look at like, oh, the minimum wage is high, the minimum wage is going to hit $15. Yeah, but with that rise, the cost of living goes up.
Yeah.
We're it's pretty insane how much it costs to live in California. I have friends that, that before all this wanted to buy a house. In order to buy a house in California, it takes a lot of money. The money that you spend in California trying to get, a 2 bedroom, 1 bath, you can spend that same amount of money in Texas and get an acre of land and 4 bedrooms, 3 bath. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, I have seen a lot of people that have started to make that exodus out of California, and a lot of companies that are starting to leave California. I mean, we just saw Tesla's leaving.
Yep.
We saw all these other places that are saying, hey, like, it's not worth it to us to stay here, and it's going to be at the detriment, you know, of the constituents, the detriment of the normal citizen when these jobs aren't here anymore. When and it's nobody's fault but the government's. No one's fault but people like Gavin Newsom that have made it so hard to conduct business, so hard to live in California. For the rights of, I don't know if you're, I don't know when's the last time you've been in LA, but it's insane, man. The
2019.
amount of home. Oh, okay. So even back then, there's a lot of homeless people. It is insane now. Like, they've taken over downtown.
Hmm.
So, I wanted to go have a good dinner for my birthday last month. I was like, okay, like, where can I go eat and sit outside somewhere and eat? And there's really nowhere. Like, I don't want to go sit somewhere at a nice restaurant, one of my favorite restaurants that I've been wanting to go to in downtown LA. I don't want to go outside and sit there and be worried about the hundreds of homeless people walking by, the people pitching tents right across the street. Uh, it's not the safest place anymore. It wasn't before, but now it's even worse. My sister works in downtown LA, and she's told me there's the amount of homeless people is insane. She's heard stories of like them grabbing, a girl as they're walking by with no consequences. It's pretty sad, but we've allowed that to happen. It's not just like, oh, people are losing their jobs. Like, no, we've allowed these people to move in. We've allowed this way of living to just take over certain areas because we're afraid to tell people, hey, you can't be here. We're afraid to tell people, hey, what you're doing isn't right. and it's at the detriment of so many other people, so many of the regular citizens that are just trying to make a living.
Yeah, no doubt. And that's sad to see, especially, I was thinking, especially for churches who going,
Yeah.
sorry to anyone that's listening that doesn't go to church or might just be listening for just, just to hear Ronnie talk about restaurants and stuff. But, people that feel like they're called by God to remain in California, I'm sure it's
Yeah.
even more of a challenge because you feel like, man, life would be a lot easier in Texas right now.
Yeah.
Life would be a lot easier in Arizona or Utah, or, these other states that aren't micromanaged by dictator Newsom or Garcetti. So, I'm sure it's, maybe you could speak to that as just, someone in the church that
Yeah.
you feel like God, going back to what you're saying, God's put, giving you a destiny, giving you a will, and it's might be a little bit harder to maybe remain.
Yeah. It's hard looking at it from perspective, because a lot of, like you said, not everyone settings from a Christian perspective or even like an eternal perspective. Um, but yeah, it's hard looking and say, okay, God saved me in this church. God has done so much in my life. But if I stay here, or if I think I need to stay here, or whatever that case may be, that it does make life harder. But it's also putting your trust in God, like, okay, you have me here for a reason, and I know that you're going to provide. When all this first happened, they were talking about shutting down restaurants, and I was like, great, what am I going to do?
Mm.
Because it's not, most people in the restaurant industry, that's all they know how to do, or all they've learned how to do over the years. And so you look at it like, okay, like I need to trust God more than anything. Uh, and so that's where having that faith comes in, and saying, okay, like I can't really make that decision, or how do I put it, make like that split decision. Okay, we're just going to leave California. We're going to move to Texas. It's taking a step back and say, okay, God, what do you want me to do? And it's where the faith comes in. It's where praying comes in. It's never an easy decision. And there have been people that have said, you know what, God saved me here, but God has called me to move somewhere else. But again, like I said, that takes a lot of prayer, a lot of thought behind it, and it's not an easy decision. Especially, like, I mean, I'm sure growing up in church, like your family is more than just your immediate family. Your family is your church, your pastor, these people that you've grown up with, that you've known your whole life, or whatever the case may be. It's more than just moving away from a church. It's moving away from family and moving away from a place that holds a lot of meaning in your heart as the church. Um, and obviously, it's different, moving, to go pioneer and to do that kind of stuff, but to say, okay, like, am I going to move because I can get a better job elsewhere? It's a
Mm.
hard decision to make. And I'm sure we can go on hours and talk about, the different aspects of that, and, being stuck in one place or whatever that may be. But it's something that people are struggling with. It's not a easy place to live, especially right now.
No doubt. And it's probably it's probably very confusing for a lot of Christians
Yeah.
who are like, God, I feel like I'm in your will, and this other opportunity has opened up for a job elsewhere, or other places aren't as restrictive, and I know I can flourish there, and I know I can be successful there, or at least work. Like,
Yeah.
not let's not even talk about being successful or making a lot of money. How about just having a plan for your life, and that you're not sitting at home all
Yeah.
day because people, you're on house arrest from the government. So that's really true, man. It's just, it takes a lot of prayer, it takes fasting. If you do that, it takes well, it's Bible calls you to pray and fast, but a lot of thought and a lot of just
Absolutely.
time in prayer and time in decision making if you are going to do something like that. And I don't envy that decision making that a lot of people in
No.
New York, Christians in New York, and in California, or in Michigan, or these other places, Oregon, that have very restrictive and tight government systems that
Yeah.
are keeping you down.
Yeah.
And yet they feel, I'm sure it's a battle going on right now in their hearts that, man, I need to get out of here, but God's called me here, but I feel
Yeah.
like I need to get out of here. Like,
Yeah.
man, I can't imagine that that decision making right now.
Yeah. I mean, we have one of our baby churches is in downtown LA. Um, they don't have a building.
Mm.
They were meeting a community center and they said, sorry, no more. So how do you, as he's done a couple like other podcasts and video stuff, the pastor from there. But he talks about like, yeah, we're going to stick it out. They're meeting in their home. They're trying to make it work. But as someone that's in a church, how do you look at this? Say, oh wow, my church doesn't have a building right now. God saved me. God has done a wondrous work in this like small pioneer church. How do I maintain that? How do I sustain that? How am I supposed to trust God? I mean, talk about testing your faith as a new believer. It's not it's almost like trial by fire. Like I got saved. God's doing something wonderful in my life. Now my church doesn't have a building. I may have lost my job. Things are crazy. Things are unsafe in downtown LA, especially when the riots and everything were going on. Like that's a real test of faith, and it's a real test of trusting God and saying, all right, what are you going to do through this? Like, because the only way that I'm going to make it out of it is by your will. The only way I'm going to make it out is if you do something.
So true, so true. And going back to the protests, it really is. I said this in one of my earlier podcasts, but one of the uh, first like reasons why I just kind of gave up on people trying to make decisions for myself or decisions for their states is when they refuse to condemn any or refuse to condemn
Yeah,
protests and the gathering in the streets. And I'm like, just call a spade a spade. Riots are bad.
absolutely.
Protesting is bad inside of a pandemic, right? Quote unquote
Absolutely.
pandemic. So if that's true, then just say it's wrong. But instead, like you were saying earlier, it's like, well, what they're protesting is a good cause. So let's just allow that to happen, allow them to burn down buildings, allow them to uh, break windows and yada, take over federal buildings,
Yeah.
yada, 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 with no consequence. And actually, let's still just close up the restaurants that are already
Yeah.
boarded up for
Yeah.
protection of themselves. Did you guys
Oh
board
yeah.
up?
Yeah. We boarded up. Um, so they actually, our restaurant's on the ground floor of an electronics company. The owner built it from the ground up, but in that area there he has like 7 buildings, all owned by him, all for the same company. So they actually went and boarded up every single building.
Mm.
Um, so my dad works for the company, and they worked like 16 hours that day, just trying to get all these buildings boarded up, and spent thousands and thousands of dollars in wood and supplies to make sure that the place is safe because you don't know what's going to happen. And we had to board up our church. Um, there was a protest plan for there's a museum and like old library right next door to our church. There was a protest plan there, and so we're like, we don't know what's going to happen. There was talks of there being some rioting, and there was talks of them, people kind of on social media saying that something was going to go down. So we had to go board at the church. My brother and I were there, standing guard just in case something happened. Uh, but it's crazy. Like, then that's the world we live in now is like, all right, now we got to board up our church. We already can't have real services. We already, at the time, we're only able to do live stream only. And on top of all that, we need to show up and board up our church building to make sure that nothing happens to it. It's pretty insane.
So insane. And of course, the riots at the
Oh, you cut out,
Capitol.
bro. I can't hear
Oh,
you.
oh, can you hear me now?
I can't hear you.
Uh, check, check. Hmm. Sorry about that, folks. We had some technical difficulties, but listen, I think that's one of the key differences in the right and left, and even people on the left, is that we call spade a spade. Riots breaking into the Capitol are bad, just like
Absolutely.
burning down a restaurant is bad. Like
Yeah.
no one's saying either one is good. I mean, you might have less than 1% of 1% saying that it's good, but it's not a common sentiment on the right, and it's not justified on the right. Um, Libertarian side, moderate side, conservative side, whatever side you want, it's being condemned. Um,
Absolutely.
so it's sad to see, man. So let's talk a little bit about as we start wrapping this up. Where do you see your restaurant going as far as like the future goes? Where do you see maybe yourself going as far as like maybe next step? Like what do you see yourself doing as far as career wise? Is this kind of where you want to stay, or are you trying to maybe open up your own restaurant later on?
Yeah, I think our restaurant does have some staying power. We have a lot of support from the community and people that want to come out and eat. Um, and so that's kind of been great for us as a restaurant. Moving forward, the crazy part in this industry, like I was saying, is that up to 60% of restaurants are going to close. Uh, and so with that comes, that possibility and that um, the thought of you never know what's going to come next. You don't know what restaurant's going to take its place. And so, I would like to open up my own place eventually. And with restaurants closing, I don't want to be opportunistic or say that I'm hoping certain restaurants fail or anything like that because this industry needs as many as it can. But with that comes that possibility and that opportunity of, hey, maybe a building will open up, maybe a restaurant will open up, maybe a place will open up that, eventually I can call my own. Um, so there is that possibility and that excitement of, all right, let's see what comes next. But, everything now is just in limbo, especially with how California is, where things change day by day and laws are made out of thin air. It's hard to really plan for the future and hard to plan for what the next step is going to be. Because as much as you plan, if they make a decision, all right, we're going to shut everything down completely again, or hey, no takeout, no delivery either. Like, what are people going to do? How can you really plan for that? So we'll see what happens the next year or so. As hopefully things start to open up. Hopefully this vaccine becomes more widely available and somehow it causes the numbers to go down. Hopefully we can see some things start to change and things start to open back up.
Yeah, I would love to see that. So do you have, going back to your beginning of, your love for cooking, your love for being a chef, what's some advice that you might be able to share and give someone that might have a love for being in the kitchen, but maybe doesn't really know how to go about it?
I would say if you want to get in the restaurant industry and you want to cook professionally, I didn't go to culinary school. I'm not an advocate for telling people not to go to culinary school because in some aspects, it is good to build that foundation there. But if you can get into a place that will let you learn and you want to go in there with an open mind to learn, that is like the biggest advice that I give anybody is be willing to learn, be willing to absorb everything that goes on, to be willing to push yourself because for me at least, cooking was more than just like showing up and cooking in a kitchen. I took it upon myself, outside of work, I was reading cookbooks. I mean, behind me, I have a bookshelf full of cookbooks, as well as, like 500 digital copies of other cookbooks. It's like it has to be something that you're passionate about. And, it's something that you want to learn, even if you're just a home cook, read cookbooks, see what other people are doing, see why flavors work together and push yourself to build upon those techniques. And if you do want to get in the restaurant industry and you want to cook professionally, go into it with an open mind, go into it with as little of an ego as you can and say, all right, I'm going to learn. I'm not going to take everything personal. I'm not, because that's especially nowadays, people take everything personal. Um, we have to be very careful what we tell cooks. We have to be very careful what we tell people, our employees and stuff like that. But if you go into it with an open mind and say, okay, why is he telling me this? Why is he telling me that I'm cutting this wrong? Or why is he telling me that this doesn't work right? Take it, learn from it and say, okay, how can I make it better? And if you go into that with like any industry, if you go into it with an open mind and a willingness to learn and a willingness to push yourself more than anything, then you'll do well. There's so much to learn. There's so much to know how to do it. This industry is always changing. There's always new techniques, always new flavors, always new things that you can do. And so if you push yourself to learn, you can do very well.
I love it, man. And it's good, I'm a big advocate of people reading.
Yeah,
And it's, that's it through with it flows creativity. And I can't even imagine like the creativity that you
absolutely.
need to be able to come up with different things. Like, even though you're that what you cooked got shot down, it was still took time. It was still something that you had to think of, that you had to come up with.
Yeah,
It was something that, you drew out and how you wanted it to look, all these different things. And that your brain only gets stimulated by putting stuff in, and then creativity
absolutely.
allows it to flow, and imagination allows it to create something new and diverse, and, how you want it to taste and different things. So, man, it's so good. Do you have a book that, people should uh, start out with, or something in mind?
Yeah, so there's quite a few, but I think if you're starting out and you really want to understand why you're cooking and what you're doing, there's a book called On Food and Cooking by Harold McGee, and it's essentially, it reads almost like a textbook, but it talks a lot about like what happens when you put something in the microwave. The Maillard reaction when you cook something in a pan and how you get that caramelization. But if you can start to understand and why you're putting something in a hot pan, why you're blanching, your broccoli in a pot of water and then taking it out and putting it in ice or whatever that may be. If you understand the fundamentals behind it, it helps you become a better cook. There's another book called The Food Lab by Kenji Lopez, I believe. He talks a lot about again the science behind cooking and why you're doing what you're doing. If you have been cooking, you just want to try new flavors and pairing new things, be a little more creative in the kitchen. There's a book called The Flavor Bible, and it is like every professional cook, everyone that loves to cook should have that book in their library. I mean, you can uh, look up an orange and it'll list off everything that goes well with an orange, like the flavors of an orange.
Wow.
And then you cross reference that, like, okay, orange goes well with duck. And you go to duck and say, okay, duck goes well with orange. But there's also a flavor affinity for white chocolate or whatever it may be. It's a pretty rad book, and it's something that can really open your mind and open your eyes to like flavors that go well together.
Sweet. I might have to take a look at that. I'm not a cook, but I, every now and then I like to cook myself up something
Yeah,
nice,
absolutely.
like an omelet.
Oh, there you go, man. I love
some
omelets.
chicken and rice.
Dude,
But
eggs are like one of my favorite things to cook.
dude, I could eat eggs all day, every day.
Seriously,
I
same
I
here.
mean I eat so much eggs just for the protein, and just
Yeah,
after a workout, dude, I'll just cook up an omelet.
there you go.
So it's, yeah, but I'm not anything special in the kitchen.
Yeah, and if I
Um
could say one other thing, like, support your local restaurants. That's a huge thing, especially if you want to learn how to cook, or even if you're interested in cooking. Support your local restaurants. I mean, I love Chick-fil-A. I love a good Chick-fil-A. You know how it is. But at the same time, I want to support those local small mom and pop places.
yeah.
I mean, you're taking your $10 you spend at Chick-fil-A and spending at a local restaurant means a lot to those people. And a lot of times, you can get something that may really surprise you, and you may get a really good meal out of it and have a place that becomes your favorite, especially during these times.
Yeah, I completely agree. Uh I've been um fortunate enough to keep my job as a teacher, and so um, I I do that whenever I eat out. Sure, I go to Chick-fil-A, and I go to Chipotle every now and then, but I've been trying to just go to different restaurants, mix it up, and I like to say it is partly because I understand that small businesses need it, and so it's nice to be able to justify me eating
Yeah.
out with that.
No,
But
absolutely.
you know what I'm saying? But it is true. Like I've been going to different Chinese restaurants.
Yeah.
When I was in Utah, me and my brother, we just went to a bunch of local places. We didn't
Yeah.
go to any big fast food places, any big chains. We just went to a bunch of different places in Salt Lake City, um, whenever we wanted to eat. And even if it was a little bit out of our way, we still went,
Yeah.
just to for the simple fact of,
Yeah.
we're trying something new, but also, this little hole in the wall place needs our business.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's so true, man.
Yeah, it needs your business and it needs the exposure. Because if you had a good meal there, you're going to tell your friends. People are going to post it on social media. Because the hard part is these big places are convenient. It's
Yeah.
easy to go to Starbucks. It's down the street, but I want to make sure that if I'm going to spend money on coffee, which I love to do, I'm going to go to a local spot. I want to go to somewhere that not only appreciate it, but also can benefit from every small cup of coffee they sell. It means a lot to those people. It means a lot to owners, a lot to people in the industry.
I love it, man. Do you have a place that you would like to maybe people can donate to, or as far as like a small businesses go, and do you have a place that people could find you and reach out to you and maybe support you?
Yeah, in terms of donating and stuff like that, the California Restaurant Association is doing a really good job of fighting for restaurants and trying to overturn some of the laws. They were a huge part in overturning what happened in LA County. It's a great place. They do take donations and stuff like that, I believe, but it's a great resource and a great place for people to look at. In terms of finding me, I'm on mainly just on Instagram, Chef RJ Tucci. Uh, but yeah, that's where I post all my food, where I do more of my professional stuff on there.
Sweet. I love it, man. And I hope that anyone that's listening to this um, truly is able to, maybe you were kind of on the side of, it's for the greater good or whatever, whatever reasons that you might have been thinking to justify certain lockdowns or justify certain regulations and mandates that have been put into place. Please, I hope you understand that there are real life consequences
Absolutely.
to these things, to the real detrimental to people's lives. People are losing their jobs, losing their livelihoods, losing their businesses that they've spent years creating, years building. It's not just all fun and games like the government would have you believe. Uh, it is real stuff, man. And Ronnie, I appreciate you and your family and sticking around and fighting through it all, and being able to speak up, being able
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
share your experience, man, because it's people need to hear it.
Yeah, they do, and I
Okay.
appreciate you having me on. This has been great. I was listening to the other podcasts that you did. It's great being able to have these conversations and see the different views, and it's something that's definitely appreciative. That I'm appreciative of, being able to hear other people's sides of how everything is going. Because not everyone may see, the restaurant side from a teacher's side and stuff like that. And it's been great to have these kind of conversations.
Yeah, man, it's been my pleasure. It's been a great opportunity, and if if I can just be anything, it's just a platform, man. If
Absolutely.
even if I run out of things to say, I know that there's people all over the world that still need to get their message out, still need to get their point across, and for people to hear. And everything's not black and white, man. There are
No.
things out there that are being tremendously affected. 60% of restaurants that are blood, sweat, and tears.
Yeah.
That's what people dreamed of.
Yeah.
That's what people fought so hard to do and fought so hard to open up, and yet it's being stripped away. And so I believe that there's good things. I'm very optimistic. I think there's good things that are going to come out of all this. I'm
I
praying
agree.
that there is. I try not to be so dead end and think of things, and even when it seems like there are dead ends, it's like you gotta continue to fight. You got to continue to press on, and that's what you're doing. That's what a lot of restaurant owners are doing, and that's what chefs are doing. And it's awesome, man.
Yeah, it is. It's very inspiring, and like you said, just hopeful for the future and being optimistic through it all.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, I appreciate you, Ronnie.
Yeah, thanks for
um,
having me on, brother.
we're gonna have to do this again.
Yeah, absolutely. Talk to you later.